Hello, everyone. Welcome to Women in Retail Talks, the podcast where C-suite executive women in the retail space share their stories of professional growth, leadership development, personal journeys, and more. I'm Melissa Campanelli, the co-founder of the Women in Retail Leadership Circle, which is a membership-based community of senior-level women in retail. And I'm so thrilled to be joined today by Barbara Garces, the Chief Digital Officer at Citizen Watch America, where she leads the vision and execution of the company's digital strategy, leveraging her wealth of B2B and B2C experience in specialty retail and fashion apparel. Prior to joining Citizen, Barbara led the digital teams at Ralph Lauren, Godiva, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art. We're thrilled to have her on the podcast today. Welcome, Barbara.
Thanks so much, Melissa, for having me.
Yes, I've known Barbara for a while. She's a member of Women in Retail, and so we're thrilled to have her here today. Checking in and learning all about her background and her leadership strategies. So I'm going to start with a little bit about your background. As I said, you've led digital transformation initiatives across brands like Ralph Lauren, Godiva, et cetera, Citizen's Watch. Can you talk about some leadership lessons that have been consistent throughout your career?
I'd love to. I think one of the most interesting things being in different organizations like apparel, fashion, museum merchandising, fine chocolates, and now with watches in jewelry's category, is that there is consistency in terms of what I've seen in terms of effective leadership. So I think one of the leadership lessons that's been most consistent throughout my career and in the various places where I've been is the importance of setting and communicating a really clear vision. I think people need to understand where we're going, why it matters, and how their work contributes to the bigger picture. But that vision only works if it's communicated consistently and translated in a way that really helps teams make decisions day to day. I think, and that can really span across various levels of leadership. Everyone has their role to play. And when that vision is clear, I think people feel more invested in the work that they're doing and they feel more fulfilled. So that really leads to the other, I think, key lesson that I've seen, and that's around empowerment. So once
Mm,
that direction is made clear, and it's kind of communicated and stated throughout the course of the year, the month, the week, then it's not about leadership controlling every detail. It's about the teams really understanding their role, what role they play in that broader vision and how they can contribute. So leaders really should be focusing on allowing their teams to do their very best work and giving them the tools that they need, the feedback, and removing blockers so that the teams remain engaged, they remain more creative, and they ultimately feel more accountable for the outcome. And that's really what leads to high performance.
that's great. I love those sort of best practices. And it's really interesting that you kind of have seen that in all of the different companies that you've worked at in all the different industries, sort of universal. One of the things I wanted to ask, and this comes up a lot at Women in Retail, is balancing innovation, but also the day-to-day demands of the business. I mean, we all know retail is changing so quickly. Digital technologies are changing. I'm sure that's a big part of your job, sort of keeping up with all of that. But how do you sort of balance that with, you have to run the business, you have people that you have to lead, you have to, keep the company running. So can you kind of talk about that a little?
Yes. So, Melissa, it's such an interesting question because that really, truly is the reality and the challenge. I think there's so much work to be done, and we get so caught up in the day to day that it's very, very easy for us to forget about focusing on future, focusing on strategy and innovation and what comes next. So, I think that balance really comes from a very, very conscious and concerted effort to remind myself, to remind the team, to talk through, okay, here's what we need to execute now, but let's take that step back and let's think about what we're building for the future. What does that roadmap look like? So we rely on tools and technology to help us do that. So one tool that we love as a team is Jira. So we work in sprints, whether it's related to our web development work or our creative work. Our road mapping is also built into Jira. So, working in weekly sprints, we look at what needs to happen now, but then the roadmap tool helps us map out and put aside and touch on what needs to come next so that we're not forgetting about that piece. Because, like you say, there's so much to be done running the day to day. It becomes very easy to forget about future proofing our business, our brand, and how we show up to the end consumer. So, I would say it's a very, very conscious effort. And I have to constantly remind ourselves myself and our team to be thinking ahead as well.
That's great. Can you I know this is a weird question, but can you spell the name of the tool? Is it
Oh, sure, of
JIRA?
course. Yes, it's JIRA. It's an Atlassian product that is typically used within agile methodologies and for web development specifically. But I think one of the things that we found so useful is using that across the various functions and disciplines within the team. So, like I'd mentioned, we use it to track our web development initiatives, but we also use it very effectively for balancing and mapping out workflow related to our creative projects as well as our digital and merchandising tasks day to day. And we work within weekly sprints, and Jira helps us map that out and balance the workload. It's very important, but it also offers full transparency to the entire team and to teams within the in our entire organization so they know what we're prioritizing at any given time.
That's great. That's such a great tip for folks, and it really shows you how 2 things. One is the importance of, like, technology and tools to keep you organized, and
Yes.
also the importance of being very specific about it, or you're putting into place the fact that some things are gonna be long term and something is gonna be short term, sort of, organizing it that way, which is super important. I know that like all organizations, all retail organizations right now, going through some digital transformation. All companies are. I'd love to get your take on leadership skills for organizations going through digital transformation.
Yes. So I think it's important to acknowledge that it is not an easy thing. In fact, it is challenging from so many standpoints, and mostly it's the change management standpoint. Change is often hard for most people, most teams, and I think first and foremost, it's critical to acknowledge that it's a difficult task. But once I think everybody kind of holds hands and embraces the fact that this is transformation needs to happen, transformation winds up delivering better results, more effective workflow, and better tools to tap into, and of course, better end results for the business. I think at the end of the day, teams can accomplish transformation and undergo that transformation with more ease. So, as leaders, I think because digital transformation is so complex and oftentimes uncomfortable, it goes back to clearly communicating that vision. What are we trying to accomplish? What do we expect the business outcomes to be? And what do we expect the teams to do as their part? What is their role in that journey of transformation? So making sure that everyone is coming along for that journey, for that ride, and understands and appreciates the part that they play. So with that, I think the empathy piece is so
Mm,
important, right? So to understand and again to let the teams know that we appreciate all of the effort and all of the uncomfortability
mm.
that comes with change. I think that goes a long way more than I think people realize. So again, like the clarity, the empowerment, but then also the empathy and the appreciation for transformation and the disruption that it can often cause, I think is the best way that I've found to look at that.
Yep, it sounds right. And as a follow-up, one of the questions I had asked or was planning to ask is, from your perspective, what separates organizations that embrace change from those that struggle? And it sounds to me like it's what you just said: communication, empathy, treating people as humans. Or, I
Yes.
mean,
Yes.
anything more to add up to that?
I think, it'll also creating an environment where that level of uncomfortability is okay. So I think,
Yeah.
having the open dialogue, encouraging the dialogue and the feedback, again, that feeds into the environment and the culture of embracing change, being okay
Mm,
with change and uncomfortability. Over time, I think that's what leads organizations to feel better about or more comfortable with the transformation. And then I think everyone winds up pitching in a little bit more, just again, realizing and knowing that everyone feels the same way about it and that it's not easy. But at the end of the day, showcasing the outcomes and how far you've come and what has happened as a result of transformation at various stages of that iterative evolution, I think, is helpful too.
yep,
Making sure, right, to call out what those achievements are, because achievements come in various sizes, big and small. All of it matters.
definitely. I wanted to talk a little bit about customers and consumer expectations. I mean, talk about things changing. It seems like consumer expectations continue to evolve. So, how has your approach to customer engagement changed over the years? And what is it now, actually?
Sure. So I think we've become much more agile. I
Hmm.
think we've relied on data for decision making and to decide whether, what the customer is actually saying. I remember 10, 15 years ago, retail and e-commerce, we were very much focused on, those surveys, the digital surveys that we were putting out and asking customers and consumers what their experience was like, whether they purchased with us, what their experience was on our websites or in store. And I think what we've seen in the landscape is that type of survey mechanism has become a lot smaller, right? And really what we're relying on more is direct feedback and engagement. And that comes from so many different places. So call centers are one place that I think we continue to get feedback from that consumer, but also, email, social is huge. And we have to be monitoring social in such a different way now that there's that constant communication, engagement, feedback, whether it be from a post, whether it be from somebody else's post, what are consumers saying about our brands? So we need to be using so many different tools now to collect that feedback because it's not always coming directly to us. It's often coming from, consumer to consumer. They're talking to each other in social media platforms and on Reddit and in YouTube. So we're monitoring that very carefully. And I think that is very different from how it had been 5 or 10 years ago. I also think that consumers don't necessarily tell us directly what they think. So we have to read between the lines and really just be thinking about and watching how they're engaging with brands outside of our own. And I think what they are doing out there in the digital ecosphere with other brands can give us clues and indications of what we should be focusing on, what they're expecting from us as a watch and accessories brand. How can we look at other things? How can we look at how consumers are interacting with just out there in the digital ecosphere in general that can guide us to closer connections with them?
It's so true. It's not like the old days where you just put out an ad and someone would look at the ad and then buy product. It's
Right?
much more convoluted.
Yes.
You don't know where your customers are, what they're looking at. I'm sure it's very challenging. And actually, along the same lines, what technologies or trends are you tracking right now, and which do you believe will have the biggest impact on retail and e-commerce in the next few years?
Oh, that's such a good question. So I think AI has been a big topic of conversation, to put it lightly. And the way I think AI will really influence retail and e-com is specific to agentic clienteling and agentic commerce. In my current role, I think through how AI can help facilitate that consumer experience And we're taking clues and cues from our existing feedback from consumers, what types of questions they're asking to help feed our shaping of what agentic looks like for us. So I think in days past, things like virtual try-on and virtual closets, they've had limited success. But I think with AI, we are going to really leap forward where there's a seamless integration of that virtual try-on effect, virtual closets, virtual outfitting, virtual clienteling. I think it'll be very different powered by AI. And so we're trying to think about it in a way where we're not just adopting AI for the sake of it, but we're thinking through very thoughtfully what is the best and most relevant experience to deliver to that end consumer. So it feels seamless, it feels on brand, and it feels at the end of the day most helpful to them in directing and guiding them to make an informed purchase. So I think for us in particular, being in the watch category, I think it's oftentimes a category that people feel like, they need to touch and feel the product. So it's a very specific challenge in my world, and where we're able to really enhance the shopping experience and have the consumer feel confident in a purchase like a watch, having that purchase experience online versus in store, and having them, equipping that consumer with everything that they need to feel comfortable making that purchase online. That's a huge achievement in my perspective.
Thank you so much, Barbara. That was super interesting. The last question is, what keeps you inspired and motivated in digital retail?
So I think what keeps me inspired is the constant evolution of consumer behavior. So it's a funny segue just from the last question, but it really is true. I've always been passionate about watching digital trends, and new experiences emerge, and not just because they're interesting, but because they reveal how people are changing the way they discover, evaluate, and connect with brands. So for me, the opportunity is in translating those shifts into meaningful ways to engage consumers. So thinking through, how do we remove friction? How does friction change? How do we create experiences that feel more relevant or useful or inspiring as consumers' expectations change? How do we meet consumers where they are while still staying true to who we are as a brand? So it's really that curiosity that keeps me motivated, and the fact that within the digital landscape, you can test and learn so quickly. And so if you try something with an expected response, you'll have results so quickly that you can either stick with that path or you can pivot. And that's really what I love about what I do. And as a leader, I really just enjoy helping teams stay open to what's next, testing those new ideas, and testing out and turning change into opportunity for the business and the brand.
Great. Thank you so much, Barbara. I really appreciate your time today. It was great to learn about you and your business and everything that you're working on at Citizen Watch, and hope to chat again soon.
Thank you so much for having me, Melissa. This was fantastic to speak with you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. For more information on this podcast, please go to womeninretail.com/podcast for show notes. Women in Retail Talks is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, SiriusXM's Pandora, YouTube, and YouTube Music. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a few moments to rate, review, and subscribe. Lastly, if you're a female retail leader interested in joining our community at Women in Retail Leadership Circle, visit womeninretail.com/apply. Thanks, and until next time, this has been Women in Retail Talks.